Okay, 7 o'clock, we'll call the meeting to order. I'm looking for adoption of agenda for September 8th, 2020, committee of the whole meeting. Councillor Bevins, all in favor? Those opposed, carried. Okay, adoption of the previous minutes of August 11, 2020, committee of the whole meeting. Anyone have any concerns about them? All good? You have a concern?
Nope. Awesome.
Okay, I'm looking for the adoption agenda. Okay, now what, Councillor Wilkinson?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I think you mean the passing of the minutes.
Oh, yes, that was the other part. It was adoption of previous minutes.
Uh-huh.
So passing of the minutes of that. All those in favor? Those opposed? Okay, delegations. He's not a delegation. So no delegations. Report executive office, legislative and human resources, and would be E2 offset levy bylaw. And who's going to speak to this?
Mr. Chair, members of council, in front of you is our offsite levy bylaw report. Though I wasn't present at your strategic planning session, administration was directed to look at the possibility of suspending the offsite levy bylaw. So when I came on in June, the first thing I did was get legal opinion. We actually didn't know how to suspend the bylaw. So therefore, in order to ensure that we were doing it correctly, we sought legal advice from Brownlee LLP. So Brownlee LLP was the firm that was selected to do this legal opinion because they had reviewed our original offsite levy bylaw. So when back in 2013, while we were preparing our first offsite bylaw, they provided us with their comments. So I was sure that first we were going to be able to get a legal opinion from a firm that was familiar with our current bylaw. So the legal opinion is about 6 or 7 pages long, so we're going to give you the Coles version of it. And at the root, there is no mechanism to suspend. You cannot suspend a bylaw. So you have only 2 choices. You can amend a bylaw or you can repeal a bylaw. So then Brownlee went into greater detail as to what will happen if we do either. So 1, to amend the bylaw, and in order to try to create this suspension, what you would do is you would zero out the charges, but then there is no purpose to the bylaw. So amendment is not the right route, according to their opinion. So the second way we could do it, we could repeal the bylaw. But Brownlee advised us really quite strongly to really consider not repealing. So one of the reasons that their advice was not to repeal is repealing the bylaw will cause inequities in your community. Think of all of those properties that have, since 2013 that have paid offsite levies. And what are we saying now? Well, I guess we shouldn't have done that. So how about those, thousands of dollars that were collected through the offsite levy bylaw since 2013. We also were advised that, let's say you do repeal and you have no bylaw, and then you'll work towards a new bylaw. During that period that you have no bylaw, you are missing opportunities. And remember, offsite levies can only be collected at the time of subdivision or development. So if you have a number of properties that develop and never develop again, you have missed your opportunity to collect offsites. And what is the purpose of offsites? They're to help you fund your infrastructure needs due to growth. The other reason that they spoke against repeal is that in their experience, and I think we can all agree with this, we will never arrive at an offsite levy rate that will satisfy all. So there will always be someone or some property owner that even if the fee was $10 per hectare, it still would be too much. So based on the advice that they have provided us, administration, we met at the senior team, at the senior level, and we spoke about what are we gonna do? How are we gonna present this to council? And we came up with, our advice, administration's advice to this council is that we leave the bylaw as is and do a review of our offsites in 2021. That would mean that we would then the review will take close to a year. It's a long process, but at least we have a bylaw in place. The test of burden really helps us in when to apply and when not to. And it will provide us with, time to redevelop an offsite model that is more reflective to a community our size. That is offsite levies 101.
Anyone have any questions, concern? Mr. Mayor?
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Lemieux, for really grabbing the bull by the horns and taking a dive into this. This is something that council's talked about for 3 years now, so we're happy to at least have the discussion moving forward. I think one of the challenges that we are faced with as a community is some of our neighboring communities do not have offsites, which certainly causes us to look not as friendly towards development or to business development. And during this time, I think it's really important that we're looking at creating development and economic opportunities and growth. My concern is that we're going to lose another year of potentially encouraging development in our community while this review is going on. So my question to you, Ms. Lemieux, is how long would a review take if we hire some outside counsel to have a look at that? And is there any way that we can speed up this process? I certainly understand the legal ramifications of this, but we are seeing little to no growth in our community. And with little or no growth, the burden on increased costs to the municipality are borne on the rest of the taxpayers. And we need growth in order to make our community sustainable moving forward. So any suggestions or recommendations in that regard?
Mr. Chair, through to Mayor Zahara. Should council make funds available to administration in 2020, the review could go to RFP, like we could start the RFP immediately and start on the review much sooner. The issue that we have is there's actually no funding in our budget to commence a review process. So the review process, I'm thinking, and I'm not an expert in the review process, but if I look at the review process of the past, it took close to a year, but we could, do our best to try to shorten those timelines. And, it will require more dedication from current staff. We're really low staff right now. We have a couple of maternity leaves. And so I would say no sooner than 9 months.
Okay, I just have one follow-up.
Yeah, go ahead, do a follow-up.
Okay, thanks for that, Ms. Lemieux. I guess the other question would be how much would outside counsel cost for this? I'm certainly not opposed to finding the funds this year to get this kickstarted. I'm really concerned we're going to lose another construction season. And as we are looking to reduce red tape and development and create development, I would really hate to see us be looking 2 years from now and still not having a resolution to this issue.
Mr. Chair, through Mayor Zahara, when I did the calculation for our 2021 budget, I budgeted $75,000 for the outside levy review.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Sorensen and then.
Thank you. Through the chair to administration, what would administration think of just perhaps cutting the fees by 50% for the year until that review is completed?
Mr. Chair, through to Councillor Sorensen, I recall this question early on when the first bylaw was created, and the consultant advised us if we cut our rates by 50%, The town has to make up the other 50%.
Well,
Yeah,
we are ready to make up the entire amount by getting rid of the offsite levy, so I don't think that's, I think that's in line with
Go
what
ahead.
we were hoping.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I may just add to that as well, one of the issues that we want to have reviewed closely through having some support as we review the offset levy bylaw is this issue we have with when you have an offsite levy in place, there comes with it an obligation to construct these pieces of infrastructure that are being funded. And at what point and what thresholds do those obligations manifest themselves? Is it when 20% has been paid, 40%, 60%, 80%, 100%? And for some of the projects that are currently listed in our offsite levy bylaw, I mean, the largest being something like the West End sewer line, we're talking about even at 50%, a $10 million obligation from the municipality. And so we currently don't have that in our financial planning. And so I think that if we were to consider something like that, it can be done. It also doesn't necessarily mean that the municipality, for example, if we were just to repeal the bylaw and have no offsite levies altogether, we can still require developers to contribute infrastructure assets through development agreements and those types of things. Then it just becomes kind of a case by case, and the challenge there can become consistency and equity across different types of development. But it's unlikely that if a developer was to come today and say, oh, we'll develop here in the West End if you build this $20 million sewer line. We just don't have the financial capacity to even do that. I think even if we wanted to, or it would be at the very least very, very challenging. And so we are certainly mindful of those potential opportunities and realities. We just want to make sure that we are very aware of what obligations come along with them, and then make sure council's informed of what position they're placing the community in, favorable or otherwise, before we proceed in that direction.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Curry.
Through the chair to admin, we've talked about these lots, but I haven't seen any data yet around how much money we've collected since 2013 in offsite levies. And I haven't seen any data about the change in our development pre-offsite levies and post-offsite levies. So we always talk about the fact that this is the assumption, and I call it an assumption, just because I've never actually seen the hard data on the development. And so we have this assumption at the table that these offsite levies have decreased development, but I would like to see that data. So I don't know if that's easily accessible, but I would like to see the data change of what our development trends were prior to our offsite levies and post, and then how much we've actually collected in offsite levies since 2013. Because I do think that has a huge, to me, when I compare looking at the inequities to who has already charged, has already paid the offsite levies, that really does play a part in how much have we actually asked people to do in 2013. If that's a lower number, that makes a difference on whether or not we do drop it by 50% and such. So those are just kind of two pieces of information that I feel like I'm missing.
Go
Mr. Chair, through to Councilor Curry, I anticipated that question.
Oh, perfect.
So since 2013, we have collected approximately 1.8 million in offsite levies.
Okay. That's a good number.
You have a follow-up?
However, I don't have the data of the trends of development, because I think it would be unfair to look at only offsite levies. Like, what did the economy do during those years, and how did the economy affect us?
Yeah.
If we are looking at our neighboring community, that touches our borders, we also have to be mindful of a lower tax rate. So was it only the offsite levies, or was it a combination of offsite and a lower tax rate? If you go to communities, if you look at Whitecourt, Drayton, Hinton, Rocky, Stony, Spruce Grove, they all have offsite levies. It is a mechanism that is used to help communities fund infrastructure. When we look at our model, and Mr. Darracott and I have had a number of conversations over the years, and our model is different in some ways from other communities. Many communities look at what areas of growth and charge offsite levies only to those areas of growth. Our levies are throughout the community. We also have discussed the number of projects that are allocated. We'd like to do a review and really, like, where are those areas that we anticipate growth in the next 25 years? And what projects are really needed in order to bring servicing to those projects? Perhaps because neither of us are engineers, we see it from a different lens. And you know, that is what we really would like to accomplish with this next review.
Okay, Councillor Byer.
Through the chair to Ms. Lemieux, Councillor Sorensen asked one of my questions regarding reducing it to zero. My other question was, is there a way to have, I'm not familiar with offset levies in any other communities, so maybe this is something that they do there. So you kind of touched on it when you said different areas of town maybe have different offset levies on them. Can you have a tiered approach to the type of infrastructure that would be built or a dollar amount associated with it? So then, like, I understand what CEO Darracott mentioned regarding, you know, an unexpected $10 million obligation. You know, we don't want to put ourselves in that situation, but if there was a smaller dollar amount that was a much less obligation that was, you know, a bit more reasonable to manage, like, is that something that you can kind of change the percentage of an offset levy regarding the type of development or the size? Is that something that's out there or that communities do?
Go ahead.
So the way our current model works is if there's a project, there's a certain percentage that is attributed to the developer and a certain percentage that's attributed to the town. So what proportionate share do they each pay? So in order to reduce the developer's share, the town could pick up more, yes. But in our current model, those percentages have already been set. In order to make changes, we have to make changes based on data.
Yeah.
And so we would, you know, I don't think administration would be in a position right now to say that, yeah, we can do that. I would prefer that an expert, a subject matter expert, guide us through that.
So just to follow up.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to see if it could be done, that, yeah, I don't know what the answer would be to that either, but if it's just a possibility to,
It is a possibility.
upon a review, to look at that, okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just an additional complexity to add to this. So with the offsite levy model that we have designed and the scope of projects being as broad as it is and basically encompassing our entire community, an example of how this can further add complexity both to our own financial planning as an organization, but also to development in the community is with the wastewater treatment plant, a portion of the costs of that project are to be covered by offsite levies. Currently, there is a deficit in that the town has covered that portion because we have not been collecting enough offsite levies in that, in the sewer category to cover that cost. And so we have to be very, very mindful of how we make that adjustment because, an $18 million project, I apologize, I don't remember offhand, but I believe it's about 30% of that cost is subscribed to offsite levy. So if we were today to just repeal the offsite levy bylaw and say, poof, it's gone, 30% of $18 million suddenly the organization has to come up with 30% of $18 million. So you can see how these issues all stack together just to, create a complex issue. I don't think there's any question that administration, certainly since my time or early in my time, has had concerns about the current status of the offset levy bylaw. We've made many adjustments, mostly on the application end in terms of how and when we apply the offset levy, introducing tests of burden and other things that have made reduced development barriers, but also fit within the context of the current model. What we're suggesting and what we think we heard council say at our recent strategic planning session, I guess it's not that recent, earlier in the year, is that we need a fundamental consideration of whether or not we've constructed this model in a way that is actually benefiting our community rather than holding us back. We're just committed to the idea that we have to go right back to the very foundational premise of how this model is built and applied in our community, not only to answer some of those complexity questions, but also to ensure that the tool is doing what we intend it to do rather than some unintended consequences that come along with it. We're also getting further and further away from offsite levies being introduced as a more flexible tool for municipalities. So more and more municipalities have gained experience, and there is more data out there. There is more comparative experience for communities our size. But again, I appreciate the comment that Ms. Levy made in terms of learning from a subject matter expert about where communities have been successful in applying offset levies and where some of the challenges or problems may exist. So we are certainly committed to this, but this is a large issue, it's a complex issue, and it's a sensitive issue. And so we want to ensure that we're producing, on behalf of the residents and businesses and potential developers in our community, the best possible result we can, and very supportive of what Bridget and her team have brought forward in requesting the support they have.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, Bridget, first off, thanks very much for all the work you've done. And really, as you say, from 2013, this gives you continuity with when it came in, and now at least it gives us that thorough understanding from what the start to now, because there certainly was lots of developmental problems at the first there. So it seemed when I was my first term and I didn't really know what anybody was talking about, but so much work went into it to get the right of way, like for that West End sewer line, which I would love to see come in, but it has to be paid for by somebody. I mean, so I think we have to really consider that we have had $1.8 million paid in this. And then if we say, oh no, you don't have to pay it anymore, I wouldn't want to be the people who paid the 1.8 million, really wouldn't. Also, when we talked about the factors that we have to take into it, it can't be just considered because we have offsite levies. Like, there's just too many factors, as you say, lower taxes in our neighboring county around us. And now with COVID, I think there's just so many factors as to why development hasn't happened. And we do need to encourage it, but somewhere your infrastructure has to be paid for too. We just can't get all that money just from our taxpayers straight out. So thank you. I really appreciate the work you've done on this. And I do like that idea of doing a review by people who really have the expert knowledge to help us go further on this.
Do you have a respond? No. Councillor Bevins.
Through the chair to Ms. Lemieux, I see that we have deferment only $800,000 now. What happens if we lower that? And what does other communities do if they have a deferment? Is it higher or lower than that? And how long is our deferment for? I can't remember. I remember a previous council has come in and we did struggle with it. And we did talk a lot about it. We weren't sure if it was the right thing to do or not. So then we said, yeah, so.
Mr. Chair, through Councilor Bevins. So the idea of the deferment is if you are a developer and you owe more than $800,000 in offsite levies, you can take 3 years to defer this payment, but it's an incremental. So I don't recall it like 100%, but it's like maybe like 25% and then a little bit more the second year, and then you finalize it in the third year. Brownlee did say that we could perhaps lower that threshold, but in my opinion, it's a very large development to incur offsite levies of $800,000. It will not help the majority of your small developers. So currently this year, I think we've only charged off-sites 3 times to date. And they were certainly not anywhere close to $800,000.
Okay. Councillor Curry and then Mr. Mayor.
Well, that was actually just following up to what Councillor Bevan had said there, because that was my question too. Just looking at that threshold and even the like payments even for lower developments, would we be willing to do? And only knowing that's in alignment with what we did with our tax relief on how to, so when we're talking about ways that we're trying to increase, so not relief, you're paying it, which then is fair when we talk about equity to people that have already paid it, but that does line up with what we did with trying to encourage development, saying, you know, we're gonna give you 5 years to, you know, get to full tax or our whole, whatever the percentage was there. If we could do something like that in our offsite levies, and kind of align that, because with developers, at least there's the similar alignment. But we're not taking away that cost, we're not taking away, you know, the inequity to the people that have already paid it, but we're also giving another way to encourage development.
Mr. Chair, through Councilor Curry, I believe it could be done, but it could be a real administrative challenge. So an individual, I'm going to say her, she decides to build a house and it's on a vacant piece of land. And offsite levies are $6,000. We give the property owner 3 years to pay this. What is the mechanism to ensure that we're going to collect? So are we going to ask for 20, you know, like 30% the first year, but how do we collect the others? It would have to be, like, you can't put it on their tax bill. So it's an outstanding receivable. We could register it on, I'm sorry, I'm thinking out loud. It could be something registered on title, but it would have to be monitored by admin. That's the only way that would work. And what if they can't pay in year 2? What are we gonna do?
Guess that makes sense.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would be in favor of getting this review underway ASAP. I think when this was brought in back in like 10 years ago now, I think council made the absolute right decision for the community. I think the basis of offsite levies is absolutely correct, but we're in an environment now that we have to relook at it and try to make things a little bit more business friendly. You just have to look at our border to see the development going on, and yes, they have a lower tax rate, but offsite levies are an upfront cost that are huge in comparison to whatever the tax differential is going to be between us and our neighbors and other communities. So I certainly would be in favor of moving this forward this budget year and taking some money out of reserve and try to get this done as soon as quickly as possible based on good information and good data. But I think that we have heard over and over again that our offsite levies could use a little bit of work. We can find out from other communities what's working, as you've talked about, Ms. Lemieux, and hopefully create a little bit more business friendly environment, because every day, every week, every month that goes by where we have status quo, those are missed opportunities for us. And in today's environment, we're competing with everybody for development. And we need to try to be as business friendly as possible because we haven't seen the growth that we need to see in this community over the last decade in order to keep up with our increasing costs as a municipality, and that's borne on everybody else. So finding that, I think what Councillor Wilkinson has said is absolutely correct, finding that right balance between development, paying for development, and also ensuring that development is able to develop within our community.
Councillor Sorensen.
Through the chair to council, I agree with most comments here. I do believe we need a full review by someone highly qualified in this type of bylaw. I do not want to miss another year, another construction season of missed opportunity. Once you've missed it, you can never get it back. So I would recommend that we do find the money to start the review now, but as well come up with an interim measure. Perhaps administration can come back with an interim measure until that review is complete that would stimulate some development, either reducing the fees by a certain percentage, or I don't know, there's going to be other ways that could, maybe limiting it to a specific zone. I don't know if that's a possibility, but I think we should do something for the interim until the review is done. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else have a question? I have a couple of comments. I'm actually against the review, and the reason is when we came through with the offsite levies, we hired a firm to help set this up. They bumbled the whole thing. They gave us broken promises. And part of the reason I'm against the review right now is a panic is what was said in the room is the economics. So tomorrow, I highly doubt that we'll have a huge development and all of a sudden a spur of growth. But at that time, if we did, comments made in the room about where we gave them tax breaks and stuff. So if some big developer comes in and says, hey, we're going to be doing this big development, and then like the other comment was made, now all of a sudden we got to spend $10 million, and yes, they could be paying us $2 million of offsite levy because it's a huge development, but then we got to come up with the other money. And we also have to be fair to the people that have paid. I can honestly tell you where we have improved from day one. It was all brand new. Nobody even knew what it was. All counselors, administration, everyone was all new to us. Now people paid it out. So when we brought in test of burden, that was a great thing because some people didn't affect, because if you're going to be building on the west end, and we're saying like that, so we've negotiated with them and put in fair deals. So the panic on the review, it must be done, but I don't see the urgency of doing it today, meaning that we do have advice from other communities. So all of a sudden with administration's help, if someone's going to be building in, we have a car dealership, now all of a sudden a motel wants to build on the other side of it, just thinking outside the box. Their demand in water and sewer is high. So if that developer comes in, because we've had comments from developers that said, we don't care you have an offsite levy, just tell us what it is. Because where we're saying collecting, if we give them other breaks, when they're originally building their project total amount, or even going to the bank to build a house, it's a cost of building. So therefore they need to figure that out before they start. So I think we can go case by case and, you know, on development, because like we said, since 2013, there hasn't been a big boom. Economics played that, because previous years when Hillendale sold out overnight, that set virtually set idle for years. So if it started to boom, at that time we could do a review of simply asking other communities, what are you doing? They're very welcome to do it. Like you said, Spruce Grove, Stony Plain, Whitecourt areas. We could just get their examples and let's see what kind of deal we can make case by case. Go ahead, Councillor Meyer, and then Councillor Curry.
Through the chair to council and administration, I also shared some of the comments that Mayor Sahara and Councillor Sorensen just mentioned about proceeding with a review a bit earlier. This is something that I would definitely want to see in the budget next year, and if there's a way to see it sooner, I'm fine in my mind allocating kind of the funds that way, or taking them from our COVID budgets, I guess. I'm not sure what source you guys are mentioning. I think that the principle behind this, I completely agree with the principle behind it, but I think that just like any policy or bylaw, after this many years, if we seem to have maybe been stagnant on it, and something of this importance, I'm fine with reviewing that. I think that if there's other ways to do it better, then I would like to see our community have the opportunity to try that.
Councillor Curry.
Thank you. Through the chair, I echo what Councillor Sorensen and the Mayor and Councillor Bayer are saying about, I do think we should move forward sooner than later with the review, but I do think what Councillor Sorensen said, I would like to see maybe some mechanisms put in place sooner, knowing that review could take anywhere from 9 to 12 months. I do just have a question about, and sorry, Sarah's not here, Mrs. Bittner's not here. Did you have in your mind already where you were thinking of getting that budget from? Was it from a reserve, and what reserve, and what's that reserve number?
So, Mr. Chair, through the council, Curry.
We're all in the same. I almost called her Council Crystal.
When I budgeted for 2021, I followed the advice of my Patsy, and we took the money out of the infrastructure reserve. So I'm sorry, I don't know the balance of that reserve, but it's large enough to take the 75,000.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, we have any more questions, concerns with this topic? If not, thank you for your report. I do like the council's feedback. Oh, do you have a?
Yeah, so through the chair to administration, what have you heard in this conversation? What is the next step?
Yeah, thank you. Council, I think, could expect to see a proposal coming back even as soon as next week about moving up the timeline and some proposals for how we would fund that. I think is the key message we heard. A lot of the comments on impact and intention of the bylaw are things that I think we would dig into deeper as part of the review, which would, include interacting with council and ensuring that whatever mechanism we design as part of that process does meet the objectives that council has.
Okay, so you have enough information then?
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Lemieux. Operational budget adjustment, who's bringing that forward?
Good evening, council. So here we have a request for recommendation on a budget adjustment for water and sanitary sewer. Through the emergency budget, we removed about 75% of our sanitary sewer budget and 50% of our water budget in our contracted services budget for the 2020 year. And we've incurred and will be incurring some additional costs to our contracted services budget in the amount of 20,000 in the water budget and 60,000 in the sanitary sewer budget. Those will occur in the water budget. It's a couple water repairs, including a hydrant repair that needed to be done. As well, in the sanitary sewer section, there was a cost at the wastewater treatment plant of about $10,000 to $15,000. We're just getting that price quoted right now. On top of that, we had 2 liability concerns on service connections for 2 homeowners in town. So that's where the amounts are being derived from. And that's all I have for you.
Councillor Bevins and then Curry.
Through the chair. So with this year extra $20,000 and $60,000, should this cover us to the end of the year?
Correct.
Councillor Curry and then Byers.
Through the chair, just a quick question, Mr. Ham, about it coming from the operations reserve. Would this have been in this budget if we had not done the COVID emergency budget?
Correct, it would have.
So I guess I question whether this should come from the operations reserve or the COVID relief fund.
Go ahead. What have you?
Go ahead.
Thank you to the chair, Councilor. I'm supportive of this coming from the operational reserve at this, if we are to proceed at this stage in particular, mostly because we're still unsure about what the COVID reserve amount may end up being in terms of tax collection, et cetera. At the very end of the day, where either of those reserve accounts, it ultimately would look very similar in terms of the financial implications that come along with it. But this is a known amount from a known reserve. That is the purpose of the operational reserve, is to support this type of thing. But there would be nothing stopping us from down the road replenishing that with money from the COVID reserve if we felt that that was the appropriate step. So that door remains open. But I do feel that this would be the most appropriate first step as presented.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, just the one comment, we're talking about sewer, and we talked about a while ago where we put in extra money to fix the storm sewers. Is this including this, or have we moved forward on it? Because we talked about it in our planning where some of the storm sewers were breaking off, causing greater problems. Is this over and above that, obviously?
Through the chair to Deputy Mayor Chouinard, The storm sewer portion is separate and a part of our transportation budget and
Okay.
would not be included in this budgetary adjustment.
Okay, because just my comment is, I really don't care where we get the money from, operation or COVID, because we did budget it. But history has shown if we don't fix problems like this, they will cause us big problems. So I think we should move ahead and sort out where the money's coming from, count A or B. It was money budgeted, move forward, and we'll figure out which bank account it's coming from. Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, with that wastewater treatment plant, the pump issue, is that the problem with the breakage we had on the riverbank? Or is
No,
this
that-
something different?
Through the chair to Councilor Wilkinson, that is a separate issue. The lift pump at the wastewater treatment plant is specific to a issue that we've discovered in the last 2 years of operation of the wastewater treatment plant, whereas the lagoon outflow is a specific issue, and we have an emergency GL for that currently, and that number will be updated in the very near future.
We don't have a price on that yet, just out of curiosity.
Not currently. It will, mid-November might be our earliest point in time for that.
All right, and that pump, what would be the reason that it would break? Do you have any idea?
It's seal assembly related, and this is the second year in a row, so we are actually looking for a long-term fix for this problem.
Okay, nothing related to all these Clorox wipes all going down the drain.
No,
Good.
This is not some.
I can't even imagine the problems out there now with that, with them not being put into a garbage, but it's advertised as flushable. I wonder if we could write a letter about that to try to get people to stop advertising them that way. I think we should try as a town, really.
We do attempt to message that on a
Right.
reoccurring basis that not. to
But even to
flush.
the manufacturer, I think it's not only our plant that's getting ruined, I think everyone's will be by this. Okay, thank you.
Okay, do we have any concerns on this topic? Mr. Mayor?
My only concern is the work which reserve it's coming from, Mr. Chair. Just concerned that we're going to be a little short there come year end, but if we can look at maybe replenishing it after we have a bigger idea of what's going on with the COVID-19 reserve, I think that'd be a good plan. I just hate to see that number under $250,000. We never know what the next problem is going to be, especially with the weather that we've had with rain and that sort of thing. Is that one of the reasons why we're seeing some of these issues, the wet conditions this spring?
Through the chair to Mayor Zahara, I would believe that the high moisture content in the ground would have a large impact on the service connections of some of the areas in town, specifically 4th and 5th Avenue, and that is why we're probably seeing some of these disconnects.
If
Go ahead.
May I add that too? As Mr. Ham suggests as well, in a normal year without the ambitious adjustments that we made as part of the emergency budget, typical contracted service amounts would allow us to deal with these issues. And these are fairly normal and fairly regular occurrences. It was one of those, let's hope for the best. And unfortunately, we just still had a few emerging issues that needed to be dealt with. And if I may, I just also wanted to go back to the mayor's comment on the reserve levels. That is also one of the activities that administration is working on in corporate services, is preparing a reserve policy that will set targets, because some of these reserves, there's an amount of money there, and you don't know if $100,000 is a good amount of money or a bad amount of money to have there unless you have clear guidelines and parameters on the purposes and those types of things. And so fortunately, I can confirm that many of these reserves are actually relatively new, and they're not things that we actively rely on. And so I am comfortable at this point allocating that money, but I think the point that you made, Mayor, is an important one, is ensuring that we are mindful of the allocations to those reserves and keeping those in our conversations when we do discuss leveraging them to deal with whatever circumstance we find ourselves in.
Okay, just one more quick. This sewer lift pump, is that part of our new sewer treatment plan, or where does that fit in there?
That's correct, sir. It's a part of our new wastewater treatment plant, and the amending the issue is part of the fix.
So wasn't there warranty, or is
Yeah.
it ran out?
No, there was no warranty because there was a large storage time on the piece of equipment, and so our warranties were passed before we installed.
Okay, I was just curious on
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Okay, so if we're done with this topic, no more concerns, Councilor Wilkinson, no, yes. Okay, thank you, sir. And now we're gonna go on to the Adco franchise fee. Who's speaking for that?
Good evening. Each year, ATCO sends us a letter to inform us of the coming year's franchise fee percentage and then the revenue and the we can expect from them through their franchise fees. The current franchise fee is set at 22.35%, and that in 2020 brought it is focused to bring in about $523,000. With the new delivery tariff revenue that they will be receiving, that percentage brings our projected revenue to $594,000. Just looking for direction from council on whether they would like to increase the franchise fee, decrease it, or have it maintain the same revenue amount, which would mean decreasing the fee, or just leave it the same and increase the revenue.
Councilor Sorensen.
Through the chair to administration, I'm a little unclear. I thought we were attempting to keep the revenue same for the last 2 years, but it looks like the revenues have been going up for 2 years.
As far in, let's see, in 2019, I believe it was forecasted the 523. In 2020, it was forecasted 523, and that's what we budgeted as well. We changed the franchise fee. For 2021, if we wanted to keep it at that same revenue level, then you have to decrease the franchise fee to 19.7%.
Go ahead.
If I may also add to that, they are forecasted amounts, and so there's some variation in the actual usage of the utility that does affect that. But for the last 2 years, the message that council has delivered to us is to target the same revenue and to adjust your rate accordingly. And as Mr. Passy suggested, just looking for confirmation of that or alternative direction from council.
Can I just follow up?
Yeah, go ahead.
So just to clarify my understanding, so for the last 2 years, they're predicting lower usage, and now they're predicting a higher usage for the first year.
That's correct.
Okay.
Councilor Byer.
Through the chair to administration, thanks for bringing this forward. My philosophy stays the same as it did previously. I would prefer to see the same revenue being brought in and lower the fee this year if that's lower the percentage, if that's how we get to that consistent income.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, go ahead.
Yeah, through the chair, the same way. When we talked about this before, just trying to maintain that revenue stream, either increase if it's going down or whatever. So I would like to see it come back with the 19.7.
Okay, Councilor Bevins.
Sure. Well, I'm on the same page. I'd like to see it come down to, I know I didn't support it last time going up this high. So I would like to see it come back down to 19.7.
Councilor Wilkinson and then Sorensen.
Well, through the chair, I'd like to stay the same or go even a little higher. We can always use revenue.
Okay, thanks for your input. Councilor Sorensen.
Through the chair to council, I would like to see it go back to the 20% number, the historical number. Our costs are increasing every year, so I don't believe it's feasible to fluctuate revenue up and down. So in my opinion, it has to stay at the same revenue or improve a little bit just because our costs are going up every year.
Councilor Curry.
I would also support it staying at that 20%, just knowing my fear would be, I don't feel like, and I know it's not a huge amount, but I don't think we're in a position to lose revenue from it. And knowing that in 2019, it was forecasted that we would make 523 and we only made 506. So I'm okay with it staying at that revenue, but I definitely don't want it lower than 523. So I do think there's a risk of if we drop it completely to that 19.7, do we end up in a situation where 2019 we were about 20,000 short of our revenue? So if that 20% would keep us at that revenue, I can't crunch those numbers in my head, Mr. Passy,
Nor
so.
can I right now.
Perfect. I can't crunch them on paper, Mr. Passy, so, so that is where I would stand on that.
Okay, my comment on it, I was against raising it in the first place, but I believe because it's projected numbers, like no use changing it because virtually nothing goes down. So if we stay with these numbers, because I agree with Councillor Curry as well, it's a projected number. So if we have a warm winter, the numbers are down. But also reason I was against it before, because at the end of the day, no matter what they charge them, is passed on to the customers. So we may increase it and get more money, but each person on their gas bill will pay, like the franchise fees are passed on like anything else. So I think we leave numbers alone and go with the flow, because at the end of the day, it may drop below 500, but it's projecting 575, maybe hit 6, but we're going into the unknown. So I would have to agree the last thing we want is to lose more money. So if we leave the number, it shouldn't burden the average individual anymore or less. Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Through to the chair, so are you suggesting it stays at 22.35%?
Yes, that
The
is
current
correct.
rate that you originally voted against?
I'm saying I voted against because I didn't want an increase, but what I'm saying now that it's there, leave it alone, because what my fear is you drop it to 19 and next year we got to go to 27 to match. So I'm agreeing that I did not want it increase, but now that we're there, let's leave it alone instead of playing like a yo-yo up and down.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, here's a clarification. Councillor Bevan.
To the chair, but that's why these things come back every year, so that we have an idea whether we have to raise or lower it. I was against it too, and I didn't like raising, put extra burden on the taxpayers. But I'm happy to say at 19.7, or if it's at 20%, whatever, I'm happy to go with that right now. This 20%, 23, the extra 1.75, we pass on to our taxpayers. So I'm happy 19.7 or 20%, whichever way council wants to go. I'm happy with that, but I don't think we should increase it anymore at all. Maybe
Well,
next year.
Mr. Chair, if I
Yeah,
could
go
just
ahead.
before you move on there. When council has this conversation administratively, we just like to remind council that this is a charge to a private company for using of public lands. The fact that they choose to turn around and charge their users for that, I recognize that that is a difficult position for council to be in. But for us, we try to leave that decision to Adco and Fortis and how they deal with that. I think it's important that we're aware of it and that we know it's part of that. I just offer that again, just for the continued context as part of this conversation. And administration certainly will respond as directed in terms of where the franchise fee itself is set.
To the chair, you just mentioned this, like we keep saying, oh, it's passed on to the taxpayers. Couldn't it be taken out of the profit margin from the company?
Good comment, but yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, through the chair. I think this is part of the problem, is that we're left to make this decision every year, and there's fluctuations, and it really kind of puts us in a bad position. And maybe we need to have a look at a policy of this is the number and this is what it is, and it gets set based on that number.
Or it goes up with
It goes up or goes down. I don't know what the answer is. In reality, these charges get passed on to consumers. It's somewhat of a hidden tax, but that's a choice the company makes. And I know that Adco and other companies, they make a significant amount of money, but they choose to pass it on to consumers. And I guess the other information that I would look for in this is what are other municipalities charging? What are the comparisons? I know we see that on the Fortis side. I don't think we've ever seen that on the Adco side. But really, it's the comment of it going like a yo-yo is I think a fair comment to make. But I think whatever decision we make, it has to be based on a certain rationale, whether that is keeping the revenue stream level or at a certain percentage and just stays that percentage, and then we just ride the waves as it goes. I would be, having said all that, I'm fine with 20%, which is the historical number.
Go ahead. So as with Fortis, Adco franchise fee is all the way from some municipalities charging 0 to some charging the full maximum amount. Most of them are around that 20%. That's the most common denominator. I just want to administratively reinforce the principle the mayor suggested there. And I'm quite supportive of the idea of stable revenue being the guiding principle. And the percentage is really not what matters. What matters is the amount of money that is derived as part of that percentage. Because in particular, if the concern is for the burden it places on the users, which are ultimately our taxpayers, then keeping that revenue stable, I think is a good guiding principle. And I have endorsed council's mindset on that. And once again, just want to share my administrative support for having that as a principle. And whether that percentage, quote unquote, yo-yos up and down is really quite irrelevant to how it impacts users, but also how it impacts the organization, which I think was the critical point. If you look at your report, you can see why we're having this debate more vigorously the last few years, is because for the first time, I guess it would have been my 7 years at that point, in 2018, the revenue was less than it was the year before. In all of my previous years, it was a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And boy, it was sure easy to just, sure, great, we're 20%, we get a couple extra $1,000 more, until we saw this huge shift in that dynamic. And so I think it's been a healthy discussion both previous years and this year to try and pinpoint a philosophy that guides how we approach franchise fees.
Councillor Byer, then Sorensen.
Through the chair to council and administration, I appreciate the discussion that we've had on this. That I like the philosophy portion of it better than the percentage, and I think that as we know, everything costs more, and any projects that we would do that would go into the energy reserve, and anything that we do from that has an inflationary fee to it as well. I think that at minimum we have to have that consistent income, that fixed income, but if there was a small inflationary piece tied to that, if we bumped it to 20% this year to kind of confirm that we get that 523 amount, plus maybe a small amount more to contribute towards any inflationary costs that we'd be spending out of that reserve, then I'm okay with that. So I'm okay with 20%.
Okay, Councillor Sorensen.
Yeah, through the chair to administration, I completely agree with what Councillor Mayor just said. I think we should use 20% right now, but if we do develop a policy, it should be based on a fixed revenue plus inflationary term.
Mr. Mayor.
And I think too, through the chair, we should also be looking at making sure that this money, just like the Fortis fee, goes to a dedicated reserve. That way it's not impacting our operational budget, whether that be for infrastructure needs in the community. That way we're not depending on it year to year, because as is noted in the memo, it can poof go away like that if some changes come from the regulators. So I think we need to be mindful of that, and maybe we should be starting to look at reducing our reliance on that for operations.
So I guess my follow-up right now just goes directly to operations.
Thank you through the chair. This franchise fee does, and council may recall from our last budget cycle that this was on the list of items that we do want to work towards moving it out of subsidizing taxation. There's a few of them, but I do agree with that principle that in a perfect world, 5 or 10 years from now, that list would be complete, and this franchise fee, much like the Ford's franchise fee, would be going to that energy reserve and being used to support projects and or infrastructure needs in the community.
Okay, then one to test Mike, who's done his homework. In 2018, what was the percentage? Because it seems to be $100,000 less. Like the one at 427.
The chair, I believe, was 20%, because historically it was always 20%, and then it changed to the 21.25, and then it's to 22.35 in this last year.
So historically, I got to back up then. Let's go 20. I don't like 22 and keep that number then. Because I was looking at the 425, 427, because the majority is saying 20. I was against the 22, but when I seen that 427, that's $100,000 drop in 1 year. So that's what scares me. That's where the number is. So I will retract and I will grow in the group and go 20 or 19. What is he asking for?
So if I may just, I think we've heard general support for bringing this back with at 20%.
If that's historically, I think everyone's good. Do we want to get, or do we have the senses in the room?
Reduction by 2.35%.
Yeah, none for her.
So do you have enough information from us, or
Yeah,
do you want us to go individually?
I will bring that back to council next week.
Okay.
For recommendation change to 20%.
Okay.
And then that will then be reflected in the budget that goes forward to 2021.
Perfect. See what nice discussion did? You made me change my mind. You can get one all the way down there. Catch it up. Already got one. Perfect, now I get two. Okay, moving on, we are ADCO, so Edson mini stat, is that what that's supposed to be abbreviated for? Municipal stat. My full words aren't coming up here, so muni stat.
Like, we do have our, I guess, do we still call you?
RCMP.
It's a couple, 6 months now that we're, Staff Sergeant Christian Delisle he is here to comment on the stats and then answer any questions that council may
I
have.
apologize, you should say the RCMP first, but go ahead,
Mr.
Mr.
Chair,
Mayor.
just before we begin, he gets into his presentation, maybe we can get Staff Sergeant Delisle just to maybe go through your background for council's awareness and give us your views on your first 6 months here in the town of Edson.
For sure, yes, with my pleasure. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, Mayor, Council, thank you very much for having me tonight. It's my pleasure to be here. I would have loved to come earlier, but with COVID and the situation now, it's a little difficult. But yes, I've been your Chief of Police since June 1st. Moved in the community on the 17th of July, took possession of my house in July. Very nice community, very welcoming, really happy to be here. If I take the time to talk about my background, so 20 years experience with the RCMP. Started in 2000, first posting in Cochrane, did 5 years in Cochrane as a constable. Then transferred to back in Muskobima, Muskogee. Worked there as a constable for 2 years and some acting supervisor role there. I then got promoted to corporal watch supervisor to Wetaskiwin. I worked 5 years in Wetaskiwin, then promoted to sergeant to Drayton Valley. That was in 2012. In Drayton Valley, I also was the detachment commander for a full year, running the detachment. And then after Drayton Valley, I got a transfer to K Division in 2016 to Operations Strategy Branch. Operations Strategy Branch is basically the admin side of the RCMP, the behind the scene. So basically, relationship with the province, with the GSG, with the municipalities, looking after planning for equipment, budget, priorities for the RCMP. So basically all this, my portfolio was the APP, Annual Performance Planning for the detachment, as well as some municipal relationship and relationship with the province. During my time in OSB, I was also tasked to go to the new training facility that we have at the airport in Edmonton. I'm an instructor in some police defense tactics and whatnot, so instructing the members there for 4 months. I was also asked to go and run the detachment at Rocky Mountain House for a little bit. They needed a commander there, so I was tasked to go there. And then in June, I got the promotion here in Edson. Really happy. Familiar with the type of policing community that we have here. So really looking forward to work with you in the next 4 years, 5 years. Any questions on my background?
Nope. Carry on. Thank you for your information.
Yes.
An important question for council,
We need to.
Staff Sergeant Delisle is, do you play poker?
I have in the past.
Bingo, thank you, that's all we need to know.
Yeah, and then I'll be honest with you, it's basically always in the red for me when I play poker, so I guess I'm a good person to call. Yeah, it's an expensive.
Well, my other comment, are you a sore loser?
No, that's okay. That's okay.
Then you're welcome to come and
I'm
play.
welcome, okay.
Did you play against Staff Sergeant Peter King before?
No,
We would
Okay.
know your level then.
Fine.
yes. So the statistic for the second quarter, basically, so when you look at the statistic in general, they're fairly good. The numbers are down in the majority of the stats, reason being COVID. That's probably the main reason. It was fairly quiet because of that. So yes, I'm kind of bringing some good news overall. So now if we look at the statistic, and we'll start with the crime against person category. So I like to compare basically the previous year to the current year. So if we look at 2019 versus 2020, the number that would be interesting to look at would be the last line other than threats, 125% increase. So let me start with this. Edson is, it's a very safe community. My previous detachments were a lot more busier, a lot more severe criminality going on. So Edson is a very safe community. So when we look at this, so there's a change between 2019 to 2020, about 5% person crime. We'll look at the number where othering threats are up by 125%. The majority, if it's not the totality of those calls, are family related. So we'll have a brother, threatening another brother, a couple threatening each other. The majority of those calls will not end up in a charge, but because they meet the criteria of being another threats, then they score a point under that line. So maybe an explanation, having COVID, people cooped up at home, sometimes, tension wells up and then someone says something that they shouldn't and we call. So that's probably the reason why we have that number. Another number that I want to bring up, basically the homicide offense related to death, we have one. There was no murder in Edson. It's that complaint we got where the gentleman shot or fired a firearm at someone that thought was breaking into his yards. Basically, it was scored as an attempt murder on our file. That's where we get that generated. But and because that category will capture everything that will be related to a death, so criminal negligence causing death and whatnot. So, but just to point out, like there was no homicide or things like this in that sense. Any questions for that first category? Okay, I'll move on to the second one, the property category. So the numbers that are catching our attention would be the break-in enters. 133%. Yes, since I got here, and it's my practice at every detachment, every day I basically look at what we call the occurrence log, what happened in the last 24 hours to see the trends, where the crime's happening, what kind of crime's happening. So break and enter basically captures everything. So breaking into a house, breaking into a garage, breaking into a shed, breaking into a compound. We did have for a little while a gentleman in town that was breaking into sheds. Basically every morning I would see 3-4 breakings into sheds. So that's why the number is so high. Some were not. So the items that were stolen were like fairly limited, low value, but still people were being victimized. So we started to look into this and trying to organize a plan to look after this gentleman here, but he decided to move out of the community and that problem disappeared. So I suspect for the next quarter, the numbers will be a lot lower. So that was good, but that's basically what generated that high number. If I look at anything else in terms of property crime, it's all lower than the previous year. Again, COVID, economy a little bit slower. That's basically what we're looking at. Any questions for the property category?
Yes, through to Staff Sergeant Dalal. I think from a public perspective, a lot of times when you come into property crime, it's very cyclical based on who is in jail and who's not in jail. I think we've seen that in our community over and over again. Would you agree with that
100%. It's basically, yes, there's always a group of people that are specializing in property crime. Mm-hmm. When they're active, they can be very active and cause a lot of damage. And then once they're caught and they're sent away, all of a sudden everything is quiet. So that was the case with this gentleman, because I was noticing the trend in the morning, looking at the occurrence log, talked to my members, like, yes, so-and-so's around. And when we decided, okay, well, we have to stop him, like this is to stop, he just disappeared, so vanished. So hopefully he found greener pasture and will stay there. But that's basically where we're at with this. In terms of other criminal code, again, everything is less than the previous year. Very safe community, so offensive weapons, disturbing the peace, fatal breaches, all down. I wanted to talk about assault to, just in terms of numbers, we're at 29 for the second quarter. Again, the majority are family related. We don't have the odd. We have the odd altercations sometimes maybe at a liquor establishment, but it's not a problem. It's family violence, family related that's usually generate that number there. So again, a very safe community. If we move on to the next page here. Oh, I'm sorry, I was not scrolling down here on the, I was looking at my papers.
They have it all in front of them as well.
Mr. Chair.
Perfect, okay.
Oh, we have a question, Councillor Curry.
Just wondering, the fail to comply and breaches, is that just so low? Also COVID, just the drop? I mean, it's a positive.
It is. There was also changes in legislations. We have to, in a nutshell, we have to basically look at the consequences of the breach before we lay a charge. So was there someone that was victimized? Was there any damage to property, or is it just a breach to breach? So then we had to change a little bit our practice on this. That also explains some of the lower number.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Any questions? No?
So if I look at the second page, where we talk about drug enforcement, so everything is lower. Again, now that the legislation for cannabis has been in place for now a year or two now, so that's a bit, we still see some result of this, although less economy, less activities, then drug trafficking is also in decrease, so that's what we're seeing here. On that page, there was nothing that caught my attention indicating that we had a problem, although one thing I would like to point out is the mental health act complaints that we got, so an increase in 12%. This is kind of part of the strategies that I have for the town. In short, our biggest challenge is nuisance, and it translates in 3 pillars. Basically, you'll have the mental health issues, you'll have like the vagrancy issues, and then you'll have the drug issues, and they're kind of all interlinked. So mental health is part of one of the challenges that we have. Is we do have some people at home or homeless that are struggling and that are sometimes even not wanting to do, but creating some calls to the police by interfering with traffic, interfering with regular businesses and stuff like that. So that's something that we need to look into and form some partnerships with agencies that we have in the community and outside, like for example Edmonton, and see what we can do with some of these people. If we don't have the services for them here, like I'll be the first one to be glad to give them a ride to Edmonton and see if they can get any help and whatnot. So that's one of the pillars that we want to address that will help us to reduce a little bit of the nuisance. When the company's calling, or businesses saying, like, I have someone in my lobby right now that does not want to leave, or I have someone sleeping in the lobby of my apartment building, so those complaints. And then, yes, some of it is fueled by drugs, so we have to tackle this. I'm not here saying that we have a drug problem compared to the other communities that I policed and was in charge of. We have similar challenges, not worse, very comparable, and we're well equipped to address them, so not a problem there. Any questions on the second page? Stats are pretty good on that page.
Actually, the one question, just an explanation, under total drugs, you got cannabis, enforcement, and federal. Federal, does that just generally all drugs, or?
Yeah, it would be any other federal, yes. So basically, cannabis enforcement, they created a separate, then federal, because
Is all other?
yeah, drugs are technically under the CDSA,
Oh, okay.
which is a federal act. It's not a provincial act, so that's why they created that category. But there's a specific one now for cannabis, just because now some activity with cannabis is legal, some is still illegal.
illegal,
I don't have a problem with my- But some is still illegal, so that's why they separated both.
Yeah, I was just curious why they
Yes,
split
in
them
the
up.
past, cannabis was under the federal
Yes,
CDSA, but now it's separate.
okay, I was just curious, now, thank you.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Mhm.
So if there's no other questions about the statistics, the other thing that I wanted to talk about quickly is basically, our GIS unit, General Investigation Section, although they don't take complaints, but they do support us. And just to give you an overview of what they've done for that quarter, So basically, they're still working on the arson files, the 2 dealerships arson files. The challenge or the issue, the work that they have to do there, it's the tremendous amount of disclosure that they have to do. A lot of videotape surveillance tapes that were seized that has to be put onto memory banks or memory sticks. Those sticks too small, actually has to be those big memory boxes for disclosures for the Crown and for defense. So they've spent a lot of hours on this. They helped us recently with the 2 missing person that we had, although they were not in town, but outside of town, but they were involved in trying to locate these people. They have done a drug search, the visual they filed, and I believe the other one was the gentleman near the skateboard park. I forgot the name, it was before my time. Other tasks like they look after some of the curb stopper tips, the scan. So that would take about, equivalent about a week out of that month. And they of course assist us on a regular basis. I say us, but the general duty members also on sometimes a mental health call. They will attend location junctions for us, take statements and things like this. So they've been involved and supporting us pretty well. Last but not least, one of the strategies that we have to address the challenges that we're facing is obviously intelligence. I did myself recruit a informant on Thursday night during a COP meeting. I won't say his first name, it starts with a K, and he promised me some maps of where to patrol, so really good. But with that being said, every statistic is good for us. It doesn't matter how big the crime is. We would like the population to report crime. And I understand that sometimes they might think, well, the police is just too busy for just listening to this little complaint, or I don't have the time to do it, or it takes too much time to call them to put me on hold. So the RCMP launched the online crime reporting website. So basically, anybody who witnessed a crime can go online and then report that crime through internet. Now, there's a limitation on what you can report, and basically this was tailored to capture those crimes that people think that are too small to be reported. They may be too small for them, but for me, they're very valuable. It basically tells me what is happening, where it's happening, when it's happening, and it helps me to basically, send my resources to the location where they're most needed. I do have a full complement of police officers, but sometimes if we decide to go right, we have to have a reason to go right, so then I don't waste my resources. The criteria for the reporting online is pretty simple. What they're looking for is basically call like a damage to property, mischief that are under $5,000, theft of bicycles, theft under $5,000, theft of motor vehicles under $5,000, loss of properties, things like this. And those crimes basically where there's no witnesses or no suspects. The items cost less than $5,000. That the property that was vandalized was, that the damage, if they were to be fixed, was less than $5,000. And that there are no items involving personal identity, like or firearms, license plate, or driver's license, things like this. So if your complaint meets those criteria, we would like the population to please log in, take 2 minutes, and report that to us so we can know what's going on. Yes, any questions?
I have one, actually. I'll just follow up with them. You said with full complement, how many staff members we have? Because we have our regular staff members and then there's the other.
Provincial, so yes, so the detachment has 23 police officers.
Okay.
So Edson is looking after 17.
Okay.
And I'll be honest with you, that's a very good number. It puts us in a good position where we can, have the flexibility to address what's.
And the K, you're referring to Staff Sergeant King, right?
I'm sorry?
The K you talked about, Staff Sergeant King that left?
Yes, Staff Sergeant King, yes, that's
I knew he was gonna come back and help us.
Yes, like it's an info I got from my sources. Secret, unfortunately.
Councillor Bevins, and then welcome to the as well.
Through the chair, I know other places have a program that they have set up security cameras that the RCMP, if they register with the RCMP, RCMP will be able to go there. And if there's a crime being committed in the area to the property, vandalism, whatever it is in that. If they sign up with you guys, if you request their security camera footage, they would be able to give it to you, but they'd have to sign up to be on that program or whatever and that. And I know I have friends that are different places around the country here and also in like Ready for a Bigger Center, Barhead and stuff like that. They have stopped a lot of the crime, or really, you know, put it down to next to L in some of these neighborhoods, because they have gone out, they have registered their cameras with the RCMP, and the RCMP is okay, got 5 people on this block to have them. When they looked at them, they were able to identify the suspect, and at least have a talk with them, to pick them up or show them, you know, or whatever and that. And it has been a deterrent, not 100%, but it sure has helped. Was that something you would look at doing here? Because I know there's a whack of people have security cameras in town here. You see them throw them up on social media, Facebook, wherever and that, and it shows these people doing it. So is that something you guys would look at, like, you know, because I know you can report to you guys that we had the ability to use a camera from somebody else, would probably help you a lot more.
Absolutely. Yes, it is a great tool. From working in OSB and being involved in some of those projects, they do have some success, absolutely. The way they're very useful for us, it's basically we know where some cameras are available. I will say that any investigation, that's one of the questions we ask anyway. Do you have any cameras registered or not with us? And if they do, we will take the video recording. So yes, it's something that we can look for, having a bit of a registry of where the cameras are. Some of the challenges with that too is that sometimes, for example, if it's a residence, if someone moves, then the fact that the previous owner registered the camera doesn't necessarily mean that the new one will let us use it, but at least we know where they are and we can still ask. So yes, no, that's something we can certainly look into it. I've seen great results with that, yes.
Yeah, I've seen it also, man, like say, you go on Facebook, which I think everybody's here, and they show somebody coming up and
Yes.
stealing packages off the porch or
Yes.
smashing out the side windows or stuff like this and that.
Yes.
And usually, when you look at them, it's usually the same couple of people that are doing it, but at least.
Okay, Councillor Bevins, we got the point. Councillor Wilson, you had a question?
Okay, not a question, really, as a proud Edson,
my turn again.
I would like to thank you
I'll
very
give you a
much as a
rebuttal.
commanding officer of the RCMP to come in and say that Edson is a safe town. I think some of our own citizens are our worst critics. They sit behind the computer screen and can say what they like without trying to help make it better. So I'm really pleased that you say it's safe. Now, do you advertise at all about the online reporting so that people can actually help the RCMP then to keep it safe?
Good question, thank you. And so basically I'm tasked through the province, through the division, with 2 main priorities. Crime reduction, basically I talked about it. The second one is communication with the population. And so with COVID, that piece is difficult. Just that the best practice that I find myself is to have a town hall, have people coming in, and that's when I talk about this. That's when we talk about cameras. That's when I have this contact with the population, get their feedback, where we're doing, you know, good work, where we need to improve, where crime is happening. So right now, because of the situation, it's a little difficult for me to convey that message. Although I'm working with the town right now to have a teleconference, like a Zoom virtual town
Good.
meeting.
Good.
I personally like those. I like to have them frequently. And that's one of the best way for me to get the pulse from the population, see how we're doing. And yes, talk about those online services, and then possibility to have cameras and this and that. So yeah, we're working on, you know, conveying that message.
Conveying it out.
Absolutely.
And just a follow-up question, the mayor, Councillor Byer, and I were on a committee on a task force about homelessness. And
Yes.
It's still a big issue, and the mayor and I were talking to our local MLA, Martin Long. They
Yes.
buy our new hospital. I'm sure you've noticed the empty building beside it.
Yes.
A lovely facility that would just be great for
Nice.
addictions center or something. So maybe if you'd like to talk to our MLA, it might really be powerful.
Yes, and I would, and even if I could, if there's a committee, be part of that committee, because that's
Okay.
kind of part of my kind
Exactly.
of strategies that I have to work on. Because when you look at the statistic, that's what we have to deal with.
The 3 things have to be addressed, and
Yes,
it's going to help
So
everyone.
absolutely, no, yes, my pleasure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Swanson, and I've got Curry and Byer.
through the chair to administration, perhaps we can help disseminate that online reporting website through our media channels.
Absolutely.
Councillor Curry.
You're very smart, Councillor Sorensen. I was gonna say the same thing, but I'll say just with our, and I don't know, Mr. Derricott, if you have had that conversation with community services, but I'm not sure if you're aware, but our community services set up community neighborhoods. And so every neighborhood has a community group and a Facebook group and an organizer of that. And those tend to, as far as social media goes, as far as Facebook, they're not a rant and rave, or at least my community's not. And I do know that, and my own, it always gets put up if there's like the break and enters. And often people are saying, did you phone the police? Did you phone the police? So I do think if that was given to Ally too, because they do give for every single Facebook group from the town that could get it posted.
So I was not aware that there's committees like this. That's something else that I would like to be involved with if it's possible. I think there's big value to hear the statistics from the police directly, and then maybe, take care of some of the rumors and
Invite them.
whatnot. And so I would be more than pleased to join those committees. And I've always said it, like, I'm here for the hard questions. Public safety, I own this, it's my job. And people have questions, worries, please come and ask me. Even if it's at the detachments, my door's always open. So, I would love to.
Would you go to block parties?
I would go to block parties, absolutely. If they have hot dogs, even
Yeah.
more.
I heard the mayor throws a good one.
Councillor Byer.
Through the chair to Sergeant Platt. So being on Highway 16, as Councillor Wilkinson said, our citizens are generally our people that have lived here for a long time feel that we're in a very unsafe community. Being on Highway 16, how are you feeling with COVID and maybe the cannabis? Has anything changed with our high drug users or hard drug users and getting drugs into our community?
So I'm not in a position to answer this because I'm too new in the community. I don't know right now the effect of Highway 16 for the community. But I mean, it's one of the major highways in Alberta. Major amount of drugs transit on that highway. I'm sure some stops here. We're not gonna lie about it. But now the drug, I'll call it problems, or the drug complaints that we have to deal with are not, anyway, at this point, to the magnitude that you would think, like car full load of, crack cocaine or this or that. So if they are transporting large amount, they're just, going through and going to their point of delivery, which I suspect is Edmonton, and then probably someone running it through here. Again, through OSB, I know some of the project that were talked about, and I was thinking that something could be done since we're on Highway 16 and maybe intercept some of that drugs even before it goes further past Edson. But but the actual impact it has in the community, too new, unfortunately, to be able to answer that question.
Okay, I have one comment. Councillor Bevins, do you have a follow-up? I cut you off because I want to give everyone a chance. Do you have a follow-up?
Oh, it's coming again.
It's coming again. Just a comment, like we're saying Facebook, but I mean through the RCMP, because as soon as crime happens on Facebook, you have a team that monitors all the Facebook sites, I would be sure of.
We do have a team in Edmonton that will monitor every kind of media outlet, and as soon as it says RCMP, they read it.
Right.
So I don't personally at the detachment. I don't. We don't have someone that will read Facebook at the detachment locally.
No, but in all fairness, like in Alberta, because a lot of times, because let's say if there's something going on here, you don't call the fire department, you check Facebook, you don't call the RCMP, it's there. So I imagine, because a lot of times people, when you're looking at it going, oh my God, are you really that stupid? You just told the guy's drug, ripped me off, and you posted on Facebook. So, and there's cases like that, so I'm thinking the RCMP would be posting this. So where Councillor Curry brought up, where it's becoming a lot of the watch areas, that's very valuable. So a lot of times if someone is monitoring, or like the comments are, have you forwarded to the RCMP? And I know you're very valuable, but in a lot of times if there's someone that would be there that would say, hey, you know, by the way, on Facebook, somebody has, like Councilor Bevan said, they have a shot of an individual that's wearing a gray hoodie, and then every other neighborhood say, hey, he's come through. So as our changing world, then, you know, Facebook is sometimes some of the truth, but it's, you know, information for you to gather.
No, absolutely. So we do have a team that monitors this. I would like to present myself accessible to the community so that when, instead of putting it on Facebook, they know that there's a place where they can go and talk to someone and basically talk to someone that can act on what they're saying. And then if they have concerns or questions or wondering why the RCMP didn't go or didn't do something, then they also have someone to talk to. So, so part of those, you know, community parties, meetings and whatnot, absolutely I would like to be there. But yeah, back to Facebook, we do monitor it. I do not get a feedback on a regular basis from Key Division about this. And I don't know the reason why, but yes. I hope it answered your question.
It did, yeah. Mr. Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I think Councillor Curry brought up a good point. The neighborhood leagues are a good way to connect. Yeah, I was searching for the name of what they were called. And I know that the next step in the neighborhood leagues are to set neighborhood watches as a part of those leagues.
Yes.
And it's all interconnected. And I think that policing is changing with some of the social issues we have in the community. That's why mental health and addictions, we gotta address those issues. I am not in support of defunding the police, but I am in support of funding areas in which support the police, whether that's mental health and addictions. And I think that by building those relationships you talk about, I think we'll see a lot of success in our community. And I know you and I have chatted about in the absence of any information, a vacuum is created, and then the public fills that vacuum with rumors and speculation, and it really does a disservice to our community. So hopefully by the town and the RCMP working together, we can counter some of that stuff moving forward. And as you mentioned, Edson is no different than any other community in terms of crime. We see spikes and valleys, and I think the open house concept is a really good thing. Peter King did one last year, and it really helped explain to residents the challenges police face, that when you have a member of our society creating crime and they have over 90 charges against them, and then they get arrested again and the criminal justice system kicks them out into the street after 3 hours, it really makes it tough for police, because you get the blame, but it's not up to you to keep them behind bars, right?
Unfortunately, no.
Catch and release.
Catch and release.
Keeps me fully employed.
Yes, it does. Unless we have any more questions, thank you for the update, and we look forward to working with you and your team as we have in the past. So, you know, with the COVID thing, but I alone for the day when it's over, we can all get together and we can discuss some of our issues, and we look forward to it. But thank you for your update.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Same. Looking forward to work with you. Councilor Mayor.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, and you can stay and enjoy the meeting, or if you have better things to do, like the guy that just ran the stop sign. We heard him going through, but thank you. Okay, moving on with second quarterly report development permit stat update. Who is bringing that forward?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Or it's just for information?
Presented
Okay.
as information. If there's a particular question, I'm sure Bridget will be happy to let Mandy try and give a shot at it. She's teasing Mandy. We would certainly be happy to answer if there's general questions, but it's just an informational item.
Okay, so everyone's good with that? Okay, then we have no sundry questions from the media or et cetera. Okay, let's go on. Do we have any email or anything come in?
None that I'm aware of, but
And we have no in camera, so I guess I'm looking for an important. Jesus. Oh wait, I can't see it that way. You made a what?
Hasn't made one yet, he wants to make.
I got in trouble last time, but go ahead, Councillor Sorensen. Okay, all those in favor of motion adjournment?
What's the motion?
Motion adjournment. I said motion adjournment moving forward. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's fair opposed. Thank you. Great meeting.